Karaoke Books.
Dubrovsky. Alexander Pushkin. Translated by T. Keane. Audiobook. Chapter 8. The reader has probably already divined that the daughter of Kirilla Petrovich, of whom we have as yet said but very little, is the heroine of our story. At the period about which we are writing, she was 17 years old, and in the full bloom of her beauty. Her father loved her to the verge of folly, but treated her with his characteristic willfulness, at one time endeavoring to gratify her slightest whims, at another terrifying her by his coarse and sometimes brutal behavior. Convinced of her attachment, he could yet never gain her confidence. She was accustomed to conceal from him her thoughts and feelings, because she never knew in what manner they would be received. She had no companions, and had grown up in solitude. The wives and daughters of the neighbors rarely visited at the house of Kirilla Petrovich, whose usual conversation and amusements demanded the companionship of men, and not the presence of ladies. Our beauty rarely appeared among the guests who were invited to her father's house. The extensive library, consisting for the most part of works of French writers of the 18th century, was given over to her charge. Her father never read anything except The Perfect Cook, and could not guide her in the choice of books, and Masha, after having dipped into works of various kinds, had naturally given her preference to romances. In this manner she went on completing her education, first begun under the direction of Mademoiselle Michaud, in whom Kirilla Petrovich reposed great confidence, and whom he was at last obliged to send away secretly to another estate, when the results of this friendship became too apparent. Mademoiselle Michaud left behind her a rather agreeable recollection. She was a good-natured girl, and had never misused the influence which she evidently exercised over Kirilla Petrovich, in which she differed from the other confidants, whom he constantly kept changing. Kirilla Petrovich himself seemed to like her more than the others, and a dark-eyed, roguish-looking little fellow of 9, recalling the southern features of Mademoiselle Michaud, was being brought up by him and was recognized as his son, notwithstanding the fact that quite a number of bare-footed lads ran about in front of his windows, who were as like Kirilla Petrovich as one drop of water is to another, and who were inscribed as forming part of his household. Kirilla Petrovich had sent to Moscow for a French tutor for his little son, Sasha, and this tutor came to Pokrovskoe at the time of the events that we are now describing. This tutor, by his prepossessing appearance and simple manners, produced a very agreeable impression upon the mind of Kirilla Petrovich. He presented to the latter his credentials, and a letter from one of Trokharov's relations, with whom he had lived as tutor for 4 years. Kirilla Petrovich examined all these, and was dissatisfied only with the youthfulness of the Frenchman, not because he considered this agreeable defect incompatible with the patience and experience necessary for the unhappy calling of a tutor, but because he had doubts of his own, which he immediately resolved to have cleared up. For this purpose he ordered Masha to be sent to him. Kirilla Petrovich did not speak French, and she acted as interpreter for him. "Come here, Masha. Tell this monsieur that I accept him only on condition that he does not venture to pay court to my girls, for if he should do so, the son of a dog, all. Translate that to him, Masha." Masha blushed, and turning to the tutor, told him in French that her father counted upon his modesty and orderly conduct. The Frenchman bowed to her, and replied that he hoped to merit esteem, even if favor were not shown to him. Masha translated his reply word for word. Very well, said Kirilla Petrovich, he needs neither favor nor esteem. His business is to look after Sasha and teach him grammar and geography. Translate that to him." Maria Kirillovna softened the rude expressions of her father in translating them, and Kirilla Petrovich dismissed his Frenchman to the wing of the house in which his room was situated. Masha had not given a thought to the young Frenchman. Brought up with aristocratic prejudices, a tutor, in her eyes, was only a sort of servant or artisan, and servants or artisans did not seem to her to be men at all. Nor did she observe the impression that she had produced upon Monsieur Deforge, nor his confusion, nor his agitation, nor the tremor in his voice. For several days afterwards she met him very frequently, but without honoring him with much attention. In an unexpected manner, however, she received quite a new impression with respect to him. In the courtyard of Kirilla Petrovich there were usually kept several young bears, and they formed one of the chief amusements of the master of Pokrovskoe. While they were young, they were brought every day into the parlor, where Kirilla Petrovich used to spend whole hours in amusing himself with them, setting them at cats and young dogs. When they were grown up, they were attached to a chain, to await being baited in earnest. Sometimes they were brought out in front of the windows of the manor house, and an empty wine cask, studded with nails, was put before them. The bear would sniff it, then touch it gently, and getting its paws pricked, it would become angry and push the cask with greater force, and so wound itself still more. The beast would then work itself into a perfect frenzy, and fling itself upon the cask, growling furiously, until they removed from the poor animal the object of its vain rage. Sometimes a pair of bears were harnessed to a telega, then, willingly or unwillingly, guests were placed in it, and the bears were allowed to gallop wherever chance might direct them. But the best joke of Kirilla Petrovich's was as follows. A starving bear used to be shut up in an empty room and fastened by a rope to a ring screwed into the wall. The rope was nearly the length of the room, so that only the opposite corner was out of the reach of the ferocious beast. A novice was generally brought to the door of this room, and, as if by accident, pushed in along with the bear. The door was then locked, and the unhappy victim was left alone with the shaggy hermit. The poor guest, with torn skirts and scratched hands, soon sought the safe corner, but he was sometimes compelled to stand for 3 whole hours, pressed against the wall, watching the savage beast, 2 steps from him, leaping and standing on its hind legs, growling, tugging at the rope and endeavoring to reach him. Such were the noble amusements of a Russian gentleman. Some days after the arrival of the French tutor, Trokorov thought of him, and resolved to give him a taste of the bear's room. For this purpose, he summoned him one morning, and conducted him along several dark corridors. Suddenly a side door opened. 2 servants pushed the Frenchman into the room and locked the door after him. Recovering from his surprise, the tutor perceived the chained bear. The animal began to snort and to sniff at his visitor from a distance, and suddenly raising himself upon his hind legs, he advanced towards him. The Frenchman was not alarmed, he did not retreat but awaited the attack. The bear drew near, Deforge drew from his pocket a small pistol, inserted it in the ear of the hungry animal, and fired. The bear rolled over. Everybody was attracted to the spot by the report. The door was opened, and Kirilla Petrovich entered, astonished at the result of his joke. Kirilla Petrovich wanted an explanation of the whole affair. Who had warned Deforge of the joke, or how came he to have a loaded pistol in his pocket? He sent for Masha. Masha came and interpreted her father's questions to the Frenchman. "I never heard even of the existence of the bear," replied Deforge, "but I always carry a pistol about with me, because I do not intend to put up with an offense for which, on account of my calling, I cannot demand satisfaction." Masha looked at him in astonishment and translated his words to Kirilla Petrovich. Kirilla Petrovich made no reply. He ordered the bear to be removed and its skin to be taken off. Then turning to his people, he said, "What a brave fellow! There is nothing of the coward about him. By the Lord, he is certainly no coward." From that moment he took a liking to Deforge, and never thought again of putting him to the proof. But this incident produced a still greater impression upon Maria Kirillovna. Her imagination had been struck. She had seen the dead bear, and DeForge standing calmly over it and talking tranquilly to her. She saw that bravery and proud self. Respect did not belong exclusively to one class, and from that moment she began to show regard for the young tutor, and this regard increased from day to day. A certain intimacy sprang up between them. Masha had a beautiful voice and great musical ability. DeForge proposed to give her lessons. After that, it will not be difficult for the reader to understand that Masha fell in love with him without acknowledging it to herself.
If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the channel.